Rogers TV.
Hello and welcome to the local campaign Waterloo debate. I'm your moderator, Dan Polishchuk. This evening we have 5 candidates participating in our debate. They are in order of last name alphabetically. Laurie Campbell representing the NDP. Bardish Chagger, the incumbent, representing the Liberal Party of Canada. Erica Traub, representing the People's Party of Canada. Kirsten Wright, representing the Green Party of Canada. And Jerry Zhang, representing the Conservative Party of Canada. To start things off, candidates will have 2 minutes to deliver their opening remarks. So with that, we'll start with Ms. Laurie Campbell of the NDP. Ms. Campbell.
Tansei. Nia Laurie Campbell. Nagawi Muniawi Sagahiganik Treaty 6 Territory Kiwitanok Saskatchewan Ochio. In my Cree language, I introduced myself and shared with you that my mother's relatives are from Montreal Lake Cree First Nation in northern Saskatchewan. I have years of experience fighting for meaningful change by advocating for social, economic, and environmental justice issues. It's a passion and skill set that I realized that I had about 20 years ago when I was working for a police service, advocating for victims of crime and traumatic events. 15 years ago, I entered a post-secondary career, and I currently work as director of Sadiji Rota, the Waterloo Indigenous Student Center at the University of Waterloo. Over this time, I have continued to develop and refine my advocacy skills, taking every opportunity that I can to learn from and listen to those around me. I've been very fortunate in my life to have so many amazing mentors. I have a strong work ethic, always fighting to amplify voices, and I am not someone who will compromise my integrity. I am not afraid to fight for what I believe to be socially, economically, and environmentally just. I'm excited to be a part of the New Democratic Party with a leader like Jagmeet Singh, who is committed to building a country that works better for ordinary, hardworking people, not just for those at the very top. This is what I'm hearing on the doorstep of folks in Waterloo about the values you want representing you in Ottawa. I am more than ready to amplify your voices, serving as your next member of Parliament. I know who I am fighting for.
Thank you, Ms. Chagger.
Hi, I'm Bardish Chagger, your Liberal candidate. Thank you to the organizers and all of you for watching. Events such as this are essential to the democratic process. Over the past 4 years, under the leadership of Justin Trudeau, we have delivered results. Canada continues to have the best fiscal position of the G7 and the lowest unemployment rate in our history. Our strategic investments have resulted in Canadians creating over 1 million jobs. Our government successfully negotiated trade deals with every other G7 country. Today in Canada, if you pollute, you pay. Harmful single-use plastics will be banned by 2021, and we are phasing out coal while transitioning to cleaner energy sources. Over 800,000 Canadians have been lifted out of poverty with Liberal programs that give a hand up to the most vulnerable in our society. We have launched a national housing strategy as every Canadian deserves a safe and affordable place to call home. When we took office, there were 143 long-term drinking water advisories. Over half have been lifted, and we are on target to resolve the remainder by March of 2021. We return to evidence-based decision-making, including restoring the long-form census and the chief science advisor. While we were unable to achieve cross-party consensus on how to best replace the first-past-the-post system, we did strengthen our democratic institutions. We made it easier for more Canadians to vote, restored the voting rights of Canadians living abroad, and made the Senate less partisan and more independent. During the past 4 years, we have delivered positive results for Canada and Waterloo, yet we have more work to do. In this election, Canadians have an important choice to make. Will we put at risk the progress we have made, or will we continue to move forward together? I look forward to the conversation this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Wright.
My name's Kirsten Wright, and I'm running to be your Green MP for Waterloo. My background is in engineering. Most recently, I've worked on how systems can improve and on social innovation, which is working with business people and policymakers to solve specific problems. I decided to run in this election because sitting with my kids and my parents, I realized that I don't know that when I'm sitting with my own grandkids, it will be in the same world. Climate change is the biggest threat we've faced as a civilization. The big changes haven't come yet, but we know they are coming. We know how to fix it, and we know that if we lead now and take decisive action at the scale of the challenges we face, that's the best way to lead in the new economy and make a Canada that works for all of us. It really is one of those moments where it's not hyperbole to say we could save the world. And the little act of voting can play a part of that. Elizabeth May has the best skills and the most integrity of any candidate prime minister. But in this election, the Greens don't need to win the election to change the game. Just a handful of Green seats can change the conversation and hold every party to a higher standard of decision, to a higher standard of ambition, and to a higher standard of integrity. I hope you'll vote Green in the next election. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Trobe.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Erica Traub, and I'm your People's Party candidate. For 150 years, Canada has had a proud federal tradition of only Liberal and Conservative governments. We have been flip-flopping between federal Liberals and federal Conservatives for 150 years. And for that time, the Liberals have always stood for limited government, individual rights and freedoms, free markets, separation of church and state, equality, free speech, and balanced budgets. The Conservatives have stood for rule of law, property rights, traditional values, social stability, and strong military. These became our core Canadian values. They became our core Canadian identity. To the rest of the world, these values are known as Western civilization, and it is the envy of the world and the reason why many people come to Canada. But today, our system is broken. The Liberals are no longer liberal. The Conservatives are no longer conservative. Today, we have been introduced to a one-world globalist United Nations agenda that is shared by all the leaders, excluding Maxime Bernier. So on October 21st, you have a choice. Do we maintain our Canadian core values and identity? Do we secure our borders to keep Western civilization in and other regimes of political sway out? Do we have a one world global government run by the UN, which tells us how we must solve our local issues, because the motto is global solutions to local issues? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Zhang.
My name is Jerry Zhang. I'm the Conservative Party candidate. First, I want to thank Rogers TV for hosting this debate. I'm excited to be running for public office, representing Waterloo in the federal election. I'd also like to take this opportunity to congratulate the other candidates who also choosing to run for public service. I'm an entrepreneur and a computer chipset design engineer with a master's degree in computer engineering. I was born and raised in a small town in northern China, educated in the United States. I worked in New York until 2004, and then my wife and I moved to Waterloo. We chose Waterloo to be our home, where we raised our two boys. We really appreciate having the opportunity to raise our family in such a positive and idyllic environment. It's time for us to give back. As a proud Canadian, I think there's no better way to say thank you, Canada, than participating in its public service. I believe in a positive future for our country and our community, where we tax and spend responsibly, encourage entrepreneurs to create wealth and jobs, and once again have a faith in our justice system. Now more than ever, our community needs leaders willing to stand up and defend Canadian values. We need leaders who can deliver on jobs, a balanced budget, and ethics. So let's work together. Together we can build a better future for a better Canada. I'm Jerry Zhang. As your voice in Ottawa, I will make our community the priority. Thank you.
And thank you all for your opening remarks. We'll now move on to the question and answer portion of the debate. Questions will be posed by our moderators, who are 570 News reporter Mark Perry and Greater KW Chamber of Commerce Vice President Art Sinclair. Candidates will have 1 minute to answer each question. Once all candidates have had a chance to respond, we will try to open up for a few minutes of open debate on the topic at hand. And our first question will come from Mr. Sinclair.
Well, thank you very much, Dan. I'm going to be very brief in my questions tonight. So my first question is in line with the national agenda and campaign today and the activities of the leader. My question is quite straightforward. Carbon tax, yes, no, and why?
And the first answer, we look to Ms. Chagger for that.
It cannot be free to pollute in Canada, and that's exactly why we have put a price on pollution. When it comes to the environment, we know that the environment and the economy go together. And a strong environment means a better future for future generations. But this is also an economic opportunity. Canada can lead the globe when it comes to environmentally friendlier solutions when it comes to energy. And that's exactly why we put a price on pollution. We are banning single-use plastics by 2021. We recognize the importance of zero net emission so that we have a better future. So yes, the environment is essential. Yes, we need to price pollution. That's exactly why we have taken the steps by also returning the price on pollution back to Canadians through the Climate Action Incentive so that it is an affordable choice while Canadians transition to a cleaner, greener future for generations to come. Thank you.
Ms. Wright, carbon tax, yes or no, and why?
So the Green Party believes that we need a suite of tools to deal with climate change. One of the most important, Nobel Prize-winning economists recently proved that carbon tax is the single most efficient. That means the single cheapest way to deal with climate change. So anyone who is saying no carbon tax is saying, let's do something that either doesn't work or something that costs us more money. So I want to applaud the Liberal government for taking leadership and taking a lot of political flack for doing something that's hard but necessary. It also, we shouldn't be buying pipelines. We need to ban fracking. We need a comprehensive suite around affordability so that it's not about can you pay more at the gas pump. It's how people have more money to be able to live better. But absolutely, carbon tax is one small implement in a suite. It doesn't need to be enormously high. It needs to be followed up with a cut in subsidy and comprehensive action.
Pass the microphone along. And your response.
Yes, so the answer is the People's Party's position with federal carbon tax is no. The People's Party position on the Paris Accord is likewise no. It is up to the provinces to implement whatever strategy they wish to do at the provincial level in terms of a tax. The federal People's Party will not interfere with that discretion. Ultimately, we don't need government to tell us what is good or bad. Ultimately, we are individuals, and if the people are committed to eliminating carbon from their lives, to living a clean lifestyle, then that is ultimately an individual choice. And if it is the right choice, then every Canadian will make that decision freely and voluntarily. But we do not punish with taxes. We do not take your money. Thank you.
Thank you. This is an excellent question. This question has been asked, I would say, most commonly by the doorsteps, by the people in Waterloo. So as a Conservative Party position is that, can I say yes and a no? Because, we need something. Climate change, it is a real threat. But we need something to fight climate change, and the carbon tax is not the solution, because carbon tax gave the big emitters a free pass. They put the responsibilities on individuals and small business owners. So we don't think carbon tax will work. Thank you.
And Ms. Campbell, your response as we pass along the microphone.
Thank you. Well, you know, I think we have a beautiful world, and I'd really like to leave some of that for our children and the next generations. And of course, we think that the carbon tax should be in place. I also feel like, you know, the Liberals and Conservative successive governments, you know, have had decades to address the climate change, and that they're just simply not doing enough. We're only 8.5 years from the end of the carbon budget. We have a plan that cuts emissions and invests in clean infrastructure and technology and creates 300,000 new jobs while doing so. And our plan, we believe, needs to be much more comprehensive, and we would be looking at things like retrofitting homes, transitioning to zero emissions vehicles, among other things. So definitely we need the carbon tax.
Ms. Chegar, I'll throw the question then to you then, to that point where not enough has been done in the period of time that the Liberals have been in power. How would you respond to that?
I will be the first to admit that we have a lot more work to do. But today it is no longer free to pollute in Canada, and I think it's clear that Canadians are demanding that governments take action. Provincially, we have seen that governments that have been elected since we took office have been elected by saying they will not act on the environment. What we have said is that we will impose a price on pollution, but we will also return that price back to Canadians so that they can make affordable choices while we transition to a cleaner, greener economy. It's essential that we take the environment seriously, and there are huge economic opportunities by doing so. So if we talk about the jobs of the future, it's exactly why we need to actually act on the environment. The young people today are demanding that governments act, and that's why we have an essential role to play. Our government has a comprehensive plan, and that's exactly why we're asking for another mandate, so that we can continue moving forward, so that we do not return to the Prime Minister Stephen Harper years of not taking the environment seriously.
And Ms. Wright, do you have a response to what you're hearing as well?
The other parties are debating how many steps to take off a cliff. The thing about cliffs is it doesn't matter how many steps you take off, you die. If our food systems break down, we're done. And that's why we're calling on every party to take a science-backed target that is in line with what will protect our home. And the bottom line is the People's Party and the Conservatives are so off in La La Land on this that people are saying door to door they need an alternative if they have conservative values. And the Liberals are still using Harper's old target, and the NDP only stepped up and adopted realistic targets after they lost seats to us. And they have now come out saying that they're going to support fracking, which means they won't meet those ambitious targets. If we took the action we all want to, which I know we can, we wouldn't need to be running in this election. We would be happy to step back and let the otherwise good government go forward.
Mr. Zhang, I want to give you an opportunity to respond because you mentioned you were against the carbon tax, but there should be a solution or tool in place. What is that tool specifically that the Conservative Party would suggest? Yeah,
so Canadians signed up to Paris Agreement, and we promise we'll reduce our GHG emissions by 30% by the year of 2030. So in the year of 2016, the GHG emission is about 700 tons. And next year, 2017, still 700. 2018, still 700. Yes, we do have a very, very hard fight waiting for us. But carbon tax is not a solution. Conservative Party have a real plan to protect our environment. We use green technology, not taxes, a cleaner and a greener natural environment, and taking the climate change globally. I think that's very important because Canadians only constitute about 1.7% of the total GHG emission. So if we don't take it too globally, we simply couldn't help. Pollution doesn't recognize borders. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for your responses on that topic. We will move on to the next question, which is going to be given to us by Mark Perry from 570 News.
All right, so my question is in relation to breaking down barriers between provinces. If your party were to get into power, what would be your party's position on breaking down these barriers between some of the provinces to encourage trade between say Ontario or Quebec or Ontario or Manitoba, etc.?
And Ms. Wright of the Greens, first response to you on that.
So a great question. One of the core tenets of our platform is how do we better work together to solve big problems? Climate change, but we have as ambitious goals financially as the Conservative Party, and we have as ambitious and broad a social agenda as the NDP, and we can do that because we're honest about where the revenue's coming from, and we're saying we're going to go after a wealth tax. So in terms of getting groups to work together, we've suggested not only across council at the top level to deal with critical issues, but bringing in cities into the discussion with provinces, working with Indigenous leaders, provincial leaders, and city leaders to break down that scale issue where things propagate one level to another and look for transformative solutions to build up our economy and build local jobs here.
Ms. Trobe.
Thank you. The People's Party is only just over a year old, but we have a platform, which I encourage everybody to go look on my website, ericatraub.ca, and you'll see on our platform in black and white the commitment to ban and remove, abolish all interprovincial trade barriers. It is astounding that Canadians who produce goods cannot drive those goods across the country and sell it in other provinces. It is easier for some Canadians to sell their goods internationally than it is to sell it in other provinces. So let's get rid of the barriers, let's get rid of the trade barriers between provinces and learn what free trade within our borders looks like. Thank you.
Mr. Zhang, your response.
I just want to remind everybody, it is the Conservative Prime Minister, John A. Macdonald, created this dominion from sea to sea to sea. So it's very unfortunate to see currently the battles between Alberta and BC over a pipeline. I think the federal government need to take responsibility and step up, and stop passing the bills dividing our provinces. For example, the bill 66, which is the no pipeline bill, we need to the government need to take responsibility to work with all the provinces, not just passing bills dividing our countries. Thank you.
Ms. Campbell, next response to you on that question.
Thank you. You know, I hear from people in our community every day about young people who are, so concerned about the climate and about the ways in which politics are really being divisive these days, and they're really concerned about that. And that's something that our party, the New Democratic Party, has always been willing to do, to work with local governments, municipal governments, and provincial governments, and more importantly, to work with Indigenous nations as sovereign nations. And unfortunately, Sir John A. Macdonald wasn't, real helpful in that for Indigenous peoples and hasn't served us well. But I believe that, the NDP is really interested in working with Indigenous nations and having at the highest level decision-making tables to make good decisions that will bring people together in Canada.
And Ms. Chagger, your response.
So acknowledging that Canada is a confederation, we recognize that whether it's the federal, provincial, regional, in Waterloo and municipal levels, we all have a role to play. And when it comes to interprovincial trade, it is essential, and our government has taken action to ensure that provinces can work better together, because the solutions that we have in Canada are not only good for the world, they're good for Canadians as well, regardless of the province or territory that you live in. Canada is a trading nation, and that's why we have not only signed trade deals with every other G7 country, we have worked better with provinces and territories. One of the first things I did when I became Member of Parliament for Waterloo was to move into City Hall. So we are one of the only ridings that I know of where the MP, the MPP, and the Mayor are all located in the same building to ensure that we are serving our constituents. The people of Waterloo will always be my priority, and by working with all levels of government, we will succeed, and that's exactly what I would continue to do. Thank you.
Thank you for those responses. We do want to move on to the next question from Mr. Sinclair. Mr. Sinclair, your question for the candidates.
Yes, candidates, I have another question. What are your plans to reduce the federal deficit? And when do you expect to reward the Canadian taxpayers with a balanced budget? Year would be fine, but if you want to provide a date in a month, that's even better. So when can we reach a balanced budget?
First question goes to Ms. Traub.
Thank you, and that's an excellent question, and that is part of the People's Party platform as well, and we are committed to balancing the budget within 2 years. And we will do that with a reduced tax burden, simplified, reduced tax burden, 2 tax brackets, and we will abolish all capital gains. The way we will raise the funds to balance our budget is twofold. 1, eliminate all forms of corporate cronyism, subsidies, bailouts, gifts that flow endlessly from our federal government to their friends. It simply is turned into corruption. Secondly, we will keep our tax dollars in Canada to solve our Canadian problems. We have out of control homelessness, addiction, mental health issues. I work on the ground level and our need is dire.
Mr. Zhang, your response on the budgetary question.
So unfortunately, I can't give you a days or month, even months. We're in a $700 billion deficit today, and each family is carrying $50,000 debt. That's a lot of debt. That's on top of your mortgage, your car loans, everything else. But we do have a plan to at least put Canada on the path to a balanced budget. So first step we're going to do is we're going to cancel $1.5 billion in corporation handouts to those wealthy executives, shareholders, or foreign companies who they didn't create Canadian jobs, and they're wealthy companies already. So of course we at the same time will give Canadians our universal tax cuts, a green tax credits for if you take public transit.
You can completely wrap up that thought very quickly.
So we at one point we're going to cut the spendings, but also we encourage people we're going to create more jobs and create more wealth, so we can have more revenue.
All right, and as we pass the microphone again down to Ms. Campbell of the MDP, the question being, what is your plan, your party's plan to reduce the budget, and if there is a date in mind when we might see a fiscally even budget?
Right. No, I don't have an exact date for you, but I've been hearing a lot from folks in the community about, we're reading, they're saying, we're reading and hearing that our economy is doing well, but everyday people aren't really noticing that in their lives, and I think that's a concern. What we are seeing is that decisions in Ottawa are benefiting the wealthiest, and it's hurting everyday people. We have a plan that would tax the large corporations, pharmacy corporations, for example, and we would save about $70 billion over 10 years and in generated revenues, and would be able to put that back into paying for some of our plans around, for example, pharmacare and other concerns that we have. Thank you.
Ms. Jagger, your response to the question.
Thank you. So we know that the previous government's approach of austerity did not work. So what we chose to do was actually invest in Canadians. And that's exactly why Canada continues to have the best fiscal position of the G7. And when you look at the debt to GDP ratio, it is on a downward trend, but we need to invest. And if it's talking about balancing budgets on the backs of Canadians, that is not the right approach, and that's not the approach we will take. Prime Minister Stephen Harper and the Conservative government added $150 billion to the national debt, all the while committing to balancing the books. And it did not work. It was an approach that didn't work. Our plan to invest in Canadians has had Canadians create over 1 million jobs. We asked the wealthiest 1% of Canadians to pay a bit more so that we could lower taxes on middle-class Canadians. Through our Can Child benefit, we gave families with children that need the most, And what we're seeing today is that we have an economy that is growing. We have the lowest unemployment rate in our history, and it is a plan that works for Canadians, and that's what we will continue to do. We will invest in Canadians, we will invest in communities, because it's the right approach and it's the smart approach.
And Ms. Wright, the budgetary question to you.
We have a plan to balance the budget in 5 years. And the difference between us and the Conservatives who are making claims like that is we're transparent about where the money is coming from. It's coming from putting a larger share of the tax burden on very large oil companies that are taking the money out of our country and on banks that are holding massive dead assets and profits based on Harper cuts. This brings us just in line with the US after the massive and controversial cuts by Trump. So by doing this, we can not just balance the budget and live within our means as we propose to do environmentally, socially across the board, but we can build a strong future together where we invest in healthcare so we can take care of our seniors, so we can take care of every person, deal with addiction, deal with the mental health crisis. It's not enough to put ideology. We need to look at the economics, look at what works, go with what Nobel Prize winning economists say works.
Thank you for those responses. Ms. Traub, did you have a response to that?
Yes, I'll actually finish my answer. So we will balance the budget within 2 years by eliminating corporate cronyism and also the masses of amounts of money in the billions and billions of dollars that are leaving this country to foreign causes, unaccountable causes, a bottomless pit. We will not carry through with the Paris Accord. That is $2.3 billion of money that will stay in our country. We cannot balance the books because we are hemorrhaging money, and we cannot balance the books as long as business, investment, the brains of our country are leaving and heading to free markets where they can carry on their businesses and their investments without the invasive tentacles of the regulatory scheme in this country, and the fact that when we send our taxes to Ottawa, they are sent out of Canada. That has to stop.
Ms. Jagger, you were shaking your head on that response. If you want to provide your thoughts there briefly here.
I would say that those comments are misguided. They are not evidence-based, and that's a clear difference between the approach that the People's Party of Canada and the Conservative Party of Canada would take. They do not believe in evidence-based decision-making. They do not believe in fact. That is why we return to evidence-based decision-making. That's exactly why we return to bringing back the long-form census. That's exactly why we return to working with academics and economists and Canadians to make sure we have the right approach as to how we move forward. What we do know is that the previous approach did not work, and it should not be misguided. This is an important conversation to have, and we are at a very important part to setting up for the future of our country. And that's where we need to not only prepare for a stronger economy, but we have to take the environment seriously. And for anyone in this day and age not to take the environment seriously, frankly, it is misguided and it is very unfortunate.
Mr. Zhang, you raised your hand there, and you've mentioned a fact-based approach, but I'm assuming this will slightly differ in your response.
Yes, well, let's talk about fact. 4 years ago, when the Liberal government took power, they also took a balanced budget. Fact number one. Fact number two, 4 years ago during campaign, the leader of the Liberal Party said he will balance the budget in 2019. You know what? This year is 2019. Now we're $700 billion in debt. And this year alone is $20 billion deficit. So we want to talk about fact, but we also have to think about the people's living cost. The cost of living has getting higher and higher, and there are simply so many people said that they couldn't get their ends meet at the end of the month. So all those signals from the people is telling me, that the Canada is requiring a balanced budget, and we're not on the right track.
Ms. Wright, we're going to give you a chance to respond here to that latest comment.
The People's Party and the Conservatives are claiming that they're going to get money by giving away money to their rich friends. This is nonsense. It has never worked, and it's not going to work this time.
Ms. Campbell, we'll provide you an opportunity to respond here because you haven't had a chance to jump in.
Thank you. You know, we believe in investing in people, and investing in people through things like our pharmacare program and taxing the large corporations to generate those revenues, and also by creating jobs through our green plan will help the economy. Those are the things that we want to do that we think will help everyday people to contribute and to help the economy grow better.
Ms. Traub, you indicated one last comment there. We'll give you 10 seconds for a brief response there.
Yes, I would like to put Bardish to the onus of telling us what is the actual number, evidence-based, of dollars, taxpayers' dollars, that have left this country in the last 4 years to take care of social needs of people living in other countries. What is the total dollar amount?
We're veering away from the original question, but Ms. Chagger, a quick chance to respond.
And what's clear is that Ms. Traub and I would have differing opinions, but Canada does have a responsibility on the international stage. When it comes to our international obligations, yes, we do take them seriously. And when we have to look at the global economy and the fact that the environment does not see borders, we have a responsibility to other countries as well, and our government will continue to take those seriously. To an earlier comment, if I might say, is in 2004, when Prime Minister Stephen Harper took office, he received a $13.9 billion surplus. It disappeared in 2 years. When they left office in 2015, they provided us just under $2 billion of a surplus after taking $4 billion out of the contingency fund. You do not pay off one credit card with another one. That is bad fiscal policy, and that is the history and the record of the Conservative Party. Thank you.
We'll move forward as we'll get a chance to touch on everyone's policies going forward. But Mr. Perry, next question for our candidates.
Mine is in relation to affordability pertaining to students. Of course, we have two major universities here in Waterloo, with the University of Waterloo and Wilfrid Laurier University. Over the last year, there have been cuts made at the provincial level, particularly when it comes to OSAP. And it almost seems like I get the vibe that there are voters that are out there that are turning to the federal government to possibly make up for some of those cuts that are made at the provincial level. So I guess what would be your message out to students and any young person particularly as well, or even just anybody who's looking to maybe go take a class or anything like that? What would be your party's platform in terms of better help students succeed?
And a lot of those students right here in Waterloo region. Mr. Zhang, first response to you, how does the Conservative Party support those students?
You're right. This is under provincial judiciary. So, but Conservative Party promised we will continue the secured findings with about 3% increase every year on the social program transfer and the healthcare transfer. So the money is there, but how to spend it? That's a provincial, that's province job. But we, on the other hand, we also give people the opportunity to lower their living cost, so they can have more money in their pocket. One of the example I forgot to mention is this removing GST on home paying bills. That should help. But the last revenue we can help student is reduce the deficit, because we're paying $30 billion just for the interest. That's the whole amount of healthcare transfer. So if we can reduce the deficit, we can help to have more money to spend on education. Sorry about that.
Ms. Campbell, the response to you on the question of how the federal government, even though it's under provincial jurisdiction, can provide that potential financial or help ease the financial burden for students.
Right. So, I see students every day working at the university, and can hear them as we're worried coming back to school this fall and listening to the amount of money that they've lost due to provincial cuts. And some of them as much as $5,000, and it's putting a lot of burden on them. There's a couple of things that we think will help to address that. One is we don't believe that for example that the federal government should be making money off of student debt, and so we would immediately remove the interest on federal student loans for students so that they wouldn't be having that added debt, and that could save them over $4,000. We also, we know that we pay some of the highest bills, cell phone usage bills, and that's something that is, students need. They need access to the internet and access to their cell phones. And, we would, the current government, has had over 500 meetings with the telecom companies and hadn't put a cap on the telecom companies, and we would cap them so that students can have more money in their pockets and pay a fair amount for their cell phones.
Thank you. Ms. Chagger, to use as a segue, how would you put money back in students' pockets from the federal level?
Students and partners in the Waterloo region were part of the creation of our platform in 2015, and we committed to saying that until students make $25,000 a year, they will not have to pay back their student loans because interest is a reality. And what we have also done is we brought forward the repayment assistance program so that if students cannot pay back their student loan, the federal government is absorbing the interest so that we're not putting students or graduates in a less fortunate situation, because we want them to succeed. What's unfortunate about the provincial government is that they have cut OSAP, which means students can't go to school. We've taken the entirely different approach. We've increased grants for students so that they can attend school and they can do post-secondary studies. We've made sure that low-income families are able to also access loans and grants that they do not have to repay, because we need to invest in people, in education. It is the right way to move forward, and that's our approach, which is entirely different to Premier Ford's approach in Ontario.
Ms. Wright, for the Green Party's approach.
The Green Party has put forward a plan that lets us eliminate tuition on post-secondary education in Canada. So it seems like a bold step, but the numbers are there. The return on education is enormous. And this is actually a personal issue for me. To give just one example, many here at the door and in family, one of the volunteers on our campaign is volunteering because she grew up without as much money and she couldn't afford to go to school. So she graduated high school. She always wanted to do law, and she sees her best chance to move into having a difference, to be volunteering with the Green Party right now. We need to make a Canada where every person can invest in their future and can hope for something better.
And last response to you, Ms. Traub.
Thank you. Well, I graduated from law school and was called to the bar, the Law Society of Ontario, in 1992. I spent 10 years in university. I have an honors BA from the University of Waterloo in philosophy and economics. I did a master's degree in philosophy, which I finished while I was in law school. I came from as poor a background as you can possibly imagine. During my last law school exams, I had put my debit machine into the campus debit machine to get some money for dinner, and it kept my money. I graduated with $55,000 worth of student loans, and I was proud to have invested in myself, and I had no trouble paying that off in 5 years because I entered a prosperous and dynamic economy. And that's what's wrong today. It's not getting the student loans to invest in yourself. It's getting a job when you graduate to pay it off. And the People's Party is committed to more freedom, more free markets, and that is the key to starting up our economic engine. Thank you.
Ms. Wright, you want to provide a response to that?
She doesn't qualify for student loans anymore. Because of conservative provincial cuts now, the access is lower than it has ever been. So don't tell me that any People Party, Scheer Ford alignment is going to move us forward toward giving people who are genuinely struggling a chance to move into the new economy, because that's a lie.
I have to respond to that because I worked my way through school and the loans were a minimal part of that. And I repaid every last minute because we had a healthy economy. My daughter, who's here today, has two friends who last week were laid off from tech startups in Waterloo. These are local students, engineers graduating in the choice profession who have lost their jobs. And when the Liberals tell us that unemployment is record low, what they mean is what used to be one full-time job with full benefits is now a contract job with two part-time jobs in the evening. They would count that as 3 jobs. It is not. Our economy is hurting. We need to have a realistic attitude about that. We are bleeding money. We have bled money from Alberta and out west from the failing of the oil industry. Our economy is in crisis and our cupboard is bare.
First, just respond Ms. Chagger and then Ms. Wright.
I'll tell you that my parents immigrated to Canada in the early 70s. My grandparents did, and my parents came shortly thereafter. And why I fight and why I put my name on a ballot is to ensure that generations that come after me have it better than myself, so that we can make sure that they have a better quality of life and they have it easier. I've been knocking on doors, and I can't remember the last time where parents had to mortgage their house to send their kids to post-secondary, and that's our reality today. When it comes to the 1 million jobs that have been created by Canadians for Canadians, majority of them are full-time. That's fact-based. Statistics Canada is showing these results, and they're open to all of you to be able to see, and I encourage you, do not listen to the rhetoric. Check out the stats, check out the facts, because that is exactly what's taking place. If we talk about some of these jobs that are being lost in our community, CG lost 21 jobs. Why were those jobs lost? Because Premier Ford chose to cut funding to CG after a commitment had been made, and the government chose not to satisfy that commitment.
Ms. Wright, we give you a quick 15 seconds there for a response as well.
If we want to have a future, if we want to prevent real bleeding, we have to imagine beyond ourselves. I did engineering, I worked my way through, I had no student debt personally. The fact that a lawyer did well coming out of school, that's fine, lawyers can still do well. But we need to imagine beyond ourselves, and we need to imagine into the future, and we need to give more people than ourselves a chance to have that success and opportunity.
On that note, we do have to wrap up on that question because we do want to get to our final question of the evening provided by Mr. Sinclair.
Okay, quick question. What's the number one infrastructure priority in the riding of Waterloo?
Infrastructure question beginning with Ms. Campbell.
Well, one of the things that I'm hearing a lot about, both from students and people who are working, is commuting to in and out of Toronto. And I know locally we've been trying to increase our two-way all-day go, and that just hasn't occurred. We've had a few more routes put on there, but it's not enough. I know that also firsthand as a student and trying to working full-time here in Waterloo and trying to get into Toronto for classes and come back. And I think that is one thing that will help Waterloo flourish by being able to have folks who do want to live here in a smaller community and enjoy all the benefits that we have here, and be able to work in Toronto if they need to do so. Thank you.
Ms. Chagger, the number one infrastructure issue in Waterloo region in your perspective.
So our government has the largest infrastructure investment in the history of our country because infrastructure is essential. And that's why I refer to the infrastructure deficit. I would agree that transit is an issue, and our government has been working with provinces and the region to ensure that we are investing in infrastructure. Another area that is essential is our national housing strategy. We need to ensure that more people, or all Canadians, have a safe and affordable place to call home. And that's exactly why the national housing strategy that has been created by experts and experienced people in our community, they have fed into this plan to ensure it is the right approach. It's not just about building new housing, but it's about restoring and rehabilitating housing that we have so that every Canadian has a safe and affordable place to call home. And when people have a safe and affordable place to call home, they're able to maximize their potential and contribute to our economy and give even more. So I would say that housing is also definitely a priority.
The infrastructure question to you, Ms. Wright.
So again, we propose a balanced approach to dealing with infrastructure needs. There's enormous needs around connected transportation. We have an aggressive strategy to put 30,000 new affordable houses in place and retrofit another 30,000 each year until we've reached target. We also have an aggressive plan to retrofit and build efficiency into buildings so we can lower costs every year going forward. And then there are so many, I'm a bit of an infrastructure geek, so things we're building sewers improperly and go into detail.
Ms. Traub, infrastructure in Waterloo region, what's number one issue?
The number one issue is that we are looking to big government to fix a problem that every successive flip-flop between the Conservatives and the Liberals has failed for decades. Our infrastructure is crumbling. We do not have rapid rail transit to the airport. We are still putting our garbage trucks and our commercial trucks on the same highway that we share with people, which results in great fatalities. So the People's Party is calling it. We are calling it that government should stop pretending that it can bring magic and fix all our problems. We have to do it differently. We have to look to the private sector to come up with creative solutions that make business sense. Because by definition, what the government does not make business sense. And when it funds one model, it is preferring likely a crudistic, inefficient, expensive way to deal with the issues. We need to privatize it. We need to turn to the public where the answers exist, where they can make money off it, just like the 407. Thank you.
Mr. Zhang, your perspective, number one infrastructure issue in Waterloo region that needs addressing.
Yep, I would agree with the Green candidate and NDP candidate's idea is public transit. We need a high-speed train in this area. When I was traveling in Europe, I can take high-speed trains from Madrid to Barcelona, and there's no problem. And there's really no reason for Canadians, for us, don't have a high-speed train. And I've been talking to the high-tech industry, the people who can design high-speed trains. They said it's not a money's problem, and the problem is too many red tapes. So we need to cut those red tapes. We need to attract more private investment. So in addition to the infrastructure, I think we also need to work on the tax sector, because right now we have so many innovative companies, but you bring from innovation to technology to product. There's a leap. Well, we need to take advantage of this region. We need a federal government support to create more jobs through technology and product.
And as much as I want to get to follow-up questions, we are very short on time, and we do want to allow for closing statements, so that will wrap up the question and answer portion of the debate this evening. Candidates will now actually have 1 minute to deliver their closing statements, and with that, we will begin with Mr. Zhang.
So this election is really coming down to one simple question. Who do you trust to make your life more affordable? I have talked with the thousands of families in Waterloo. Many people told me they are working harder and harder. They're cutting their vacations, but they're barely getting by. Life is getting more expensive, and the Liberal government is making it worse. The Conservative Party has a plan for you to get ahead. We will cancel the carbon tax, remove the GST from home heating, support small business, improve the RSP, and implement a universal tax cut so you can have more money left in your own pockets for your kids or for your retirements. So I'm Jerry Zhang. On October 21, I'm asking for your support so we can restore the integrity, ethics, and lower the cost of living for all Canadians. Thank you.
Ms. Traub.
Thank you. Canada needs a reboot. The People's Party has a common sense policy and platform. We will defend Canada's sovereignty and Canadian values, and we will keep our tax dollars at home to take care of vital needs and interests. Choose a principled leader. Maxime Bernier has a moral compass. He has the courage to tell you the truth. He cannot be bought. He is intelligent. He is respectable on a world stage, and he has shown a lifelong commitment to small government and individual freedom. 4 years from now, Canada will be going downhill with more of the same, and our cupboard is already depleted, or we will live in a Canada that is prosperous, free, and our economic engine is roaring. We will have a pipeline, so put your X next to Traub. Can the People's Party win? As Maxime Bernier said, just watch us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Wright.
So the other parties are talking about how many steps they want to take off a cliff. The thing about a cliff is it doesn't matter how many steps you take off the edge, you die. If our food systems break down, we're done. We need a different kind of politics in this country. We need one that comes up with solutions that are suited to the scale of the problems that we need. The Greens have proposed a comprehensive, evidence-based, fiscally sound plan that does this to make a Canada that works for all of us. Elizabeth May has the best skills and the most integrity. And what we're proposing is that we step forward now and lead as a nation. That's the Green promise. Vote Green in this election and help us change the conversation.
Thank you. Ms. Chagger.
There are many issues confronting Canadians, such as climate change, reconciliation, and affordability. And in order to address these and other challenges, we must take a holistic approach, one that recognizes the interconnections between the economy, education, health, social well-being, and the environment. 4 years ago, I committed to being a strong voice for you. And I knew back then that we could do better. We could be a just society of equity and respect for all. We could regain status on the international stage, and we could make decisions based on evidence, not ideology. Canadians are better off today than they were 4 years ago. We have made progress, yet we have a lot more work to do. And I believe that together, we will do even better. I will keep working hard for you, and I'm asking you to choose forward and to support me, Bardish Chagger, to continue representing you as your Member of Parliament for the riding of Waterloo. Thank you.
And Ms. Campbell.
Well, when I've been out in the community in Waterloo, I'm hearing from a lot of people that they're feeling let down from the Liberals, and I think this election is an opportunity to where you don't have to choose between a Liberal government that has broken promises and a Conservative government that will do nothing to tackle climate change. And today, a national organization, Our Time for a Green New Deal, an organization of young people under 35, released the candidates that they endorsed. And what they were basing their decision on was the people who were listening to science, Indigenous rights and sovereignty, and creating good jobs while changing to a green energy, and justice and equity for all. And I'm proud to say that there was over 25 NDP candidates that made that list, and less than 10 Green Party candidates that made that list. And I think that speaks to the overall social justice, social, economical, environment justice that the NDP party stands for. I'm proud to be part of a party that values integrity, puts people first, and is proposing more and just fair policies that work for everyone. I do stand for integrity, social and economic, environmental justice, and I'm ready to amplify your voices in Ottawa. On October 21st, vote for me, Laurie Campbell.
Thank you very much for tuning in at home, and good night.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.
It's getting so cold.
You have become close to Abigail.
She is a viper.
I'm getting super evil vibes.
I don't get it.
I'm trapped in a romantic comedy.
Bathhouse baptized. I think somebody turned on the waves.
candid talk.
I don't believe in retirement, so I do not believe in retirement.